I have been hearing the stat for years that men will apply for a job when they are about 60% qualified for said job. But women, on the other hand, will only apply for that job if they feel they are 80 to 90% qualified, if not 100%. I feel like the 80 to 90% was actually an improvement over when women thought that they had to hit every single box, right? We had to check off every single thing on that job description, and we had to be good at it and have clear examples of why we were good at it before we would apply for any role, meaning that we were overqualified for every single thing that we were looking at. Meanwhile, men were imagining that they could grow into the role, that they would learn things, that obviously, if they were taking on a new job or if they were being promoted, that there was an expectation that they would continue to get better in that job and take on all of those skills, right? They had this confidence about them. Now, we've been talking about that for years, like I said. But I think I figured out why that happens. So, to back up, we've been spending years now trying to get women to just be more confident, right? Just skip all of the things that go into why they feel that way, why they think they need to be so prepared before they even hit that apply button. And we went right to just do it, just take the step. And while there is value in that, right? There is value in just doing the things before you feel ready, in knowing that, okay, men would do this at 60%. And so if I can hit 6 out of 10, I'm just going to click the button. I'm just going to give it a try. There is value there. But there's also value in understanding where that comes from. And as women, that's something that we oftentimes want, right? Even if we are the person who's ready to take action, we still want to know what is holding us back in the first place. We get really curious about that. We get really interested in that. And so after working with so many high-level leaders, I think I figured out at least part of where this comes from. What I see so often with women is a discredit of their talents. They will see something that is so natural for them. It just comes so easily, but they tend to think that it's a problem, that it's a detriment, that it's something that's holding them back. When in actuality, it's oftentimes just the way they are using it. One of the very first things that we do in leadership coaching is transform how you are thinking about your talents. We use this book right here. This is Strengths-Based Leadership, right? And so you go through, you take the assessment, and you figure out what some of those natural talents are. And without fail, I will have women come back to their next coaching session and say, yeah, I knew I was analytical. Yeah, I knew I was futuristic. I maybe didn't have the word for it, but I knew that that was something that was important to me. What I didn't know was that it was a good thing, right? I have examples from almost every client I've worked with where they thought that this thing that came so natural, this thing that was such a strong talent in their lives, was the very thing that was holding them back, when in actuality, all they needed to do was lead with that strength rather than lean into it. Let me explain the difference. So one client that I had been working with had a very strong strength. When you do strengths-based leadership, you get a 1 through 35, but your top 5 are your strongest strengths, right? They are the talents that you are most heavily leaning into, right? And so one of hers was futuristic, which meant that she had this beautiful mind for the future vision of what was going to happen in her business, the future vision of what she could see for the community around her and how she wanted to leverage that and build it up, because she could see it. She could vividly see everything that could be in the next 10 years if people would just take action. if she would just take the right actions, if the employees on her team would take the right actions, if all of these community developers and companies and nonprofits in the area that she lived in would just keep moving forward, she could see this beautiful vision. Now, the problem was she was just letting all of that flow out of her mouth. She was like a gumball machine. She would have these ideas, they would pop up in her head, like all of these beautiful gumballs, right? Everything had its own color and was probably delicious. And then anytime a quarter would come in and she would have some great idea, it would come right out of her mouth automatically. Not everybody was ready for that vision. Not everybody saw it the same way she did. And so she thought that having this futuristic view of things was something that she needed to hide away. It was something that she needed to keep under wraps. She could not share it anymore because she thought that it was a detriment to getting the work done today. That was because she was leaning into being futuristic. When she learned to lead with futuristic, then she could ask some questions. She could get curious. She could guide people down the path of their own future vision rather than exclusively sharing hers. Right? So once she learned to lead with it, then she could lead other people to utilize that strength that came so naturally to her. Let's look at another one that was working in corporate, right? Because not everybody has this entrepreneurial vision in them, right? You can have that. You can be an entrepreneur and be using that entrepreneurial vision even when you are working within somebody else's organization or within a public organization. But oftentimes we think of other strengths as being more important in those situations. So let's talk about one of those. I worked with another client who was incredibly analytical. She was thinking of all of the things that would impact a decision, right? So if we turn left here, we are going to run into this rock, this tree, this stumble. These are all the things that could go wrong. She was being invited to all of the meetings, but no one seemed to appreciate her thoughts, seemed to appreciate all of the analysis that she had put into thinking through everything that could happen. Right? If you are a very type A person, or if you're someone with a little bit of anxiety, you know that that can be a superpower because it allows you to prepare for a variety of things that could go awry, right? And that's exactly what this client was doing. She was using this analytical superpower to think through every single variable that could happen on a project and bringing them up in the meetings. She kept getting invited, but she kept getting sort of pushed to the side a little bit. People seemed to be annoyed or frustrated when she would bring up all of these thoughts. And so again, because she was leaning into it, because she was getting overly prepared before the meeting to come up with all of these potentially harmful scenarios, they were treating it like a weakness. And she was thinking of it as a weakness. Now, it wasn't a weakness. The weakness came in just leaning into that talent, just leaning into that strength. When she started to lead with it, she could again approach those meetings with more curiosity. She could ask more questions. She could guide the people within those meetings to utilize her strength, right? She could use it to guide them into coming up with these scenarios on their own. She could say things like, I wonder what the impact to customer service will be if we increase sales to that level. What do you think will happen? People are naturally more excited, more engaged with things that they come up with on their own. So when she would say things like, I wonder what would happen to customer service, and allow someone else to answer that question, they were naturally more invested in that impact themselves. Whereas when she was just leaning into it and she would come at it and say, our customer service is going to drop if we increase sales this quickly. We have seen it happen time and time again over the course of the past 5 years. No one was interested in that. They were interested in pushing back on her and proving her wrong because she was the only one who brought that view to the meeting. They knew they needed her. They knew they needed that insight. That's why they kept inviting her to those meetings. But they didn't appreciate the way that it was shared because she was leaning into the talent rather than leading with the talent. Okay. So if you are someone who thinks it comes so naturally to me, but I have to bury it down, I have to hide this thing that is so obvious to me because nobody else appreciates it. It's not that that thing isn't valuable. It's not that your strengths aren't valuable things that everybody can learn from. It's that you are simply leaning into it instead of leading with it. And if you are someone who wants to transform that, you want to use your strengths for good to lead everyone around you, whether it's your community and your company, or whether it's your peers or your team that reports to you. If you want to be able to use those strengths and talents to build something beautiful around you, then I want you to click the link below and let's just set up some time to talk about what might be possible for you when you lead with your strengths. All right, I hope that this was helpful for you today. Go ahead and click subscribe so you never miss a video and leave a comment with what you think your strengths are that you've only ever seen as weaknesses.